2009 saw the first mention online of the Slender Man, a character created on the internet, and one that has grown to urban legend proportions. But if it was created in 2009, why have there been reports of a Slender Man in Accrington for 50 years? And do the origins of the Accrington Slender Man actually date back to 1896 and a horrific murder that took place here? Hi everybody, Matt back with you, hope you're okay. We start today's video in Accrington Town Centre. This space here, where the Boots and Costa Coffee is, was once a cinema. This was Unit 4 Cinema, which opened in April 1937. It was a successful cinema, and the decision was taken in 1973 to increase the screens from 1 to 3. So renovation works got underway. However, in 1974, some strange events took place at the cinema. During a midnight screening of an X-rated film, the curtains of the cinema screen closed during the performance, much to the annoyance of the viewers. The cinema manager went to check what was going on, and heading down a corridor, he saw a blue light. When he approached it, he shone his torch at the light, and the shadow of a tall, thin man appeared. As conversion work continued to get underway, another workman reported 2 icy hands on his shoulders. He ran from the building and never returned. The cinema's resident cat was apparently even panic-stricken to go into various areas of the cinema. Initially, a medium was brought in, and eventually so was a priest to perform an exorcism. This seemed to do the trick, and the cinema never had any other issues, other than being closed down in 1990 and quickly demolished. So although the Slender Man seemed to have been banished from the cinema, it wasn't long before he took up residence elsewhere in Accrington. Okay, this is Cannon Street, and in the 1990s this is where you would find the Conservative Club. And on one specific night, the staff on the bar reported that it had been a very quiet night, and what they'd done is the bar itself could look through into the snooker hall, and the lady on the bar just thought somebody was wandering around looking for the toilets. But no, it was something very, very different in the snooker room. This burnt-out ruin is all that remains today of the once very impressive building of the Conservative Club. A report from the Conservative Club from the 1990s would suggest that the Slender Man of Accrington had found a new place to haunt. A staff member was manning the bar on a quiet night, and in the empty snooker room she spotted a figure who she thought may have been somebody looking for the bathroom. It was a tall man wearing dark clothes and a long hat, but had no facial features. He was leaning on the bar, opaque, like a thick mist, and started to move and lean towards the woman as if looking for something. She described it as being long and stretched out as if pulled from all ends. Just seconds later, it vanished. The Slender Man seemed to have found his new area to haunt. This part of Accrington alone, there have been reports of the tall man with the featureless face and the black suit on Black Abbey Street, at St. James's Church, as well as the Black Abbey pub and numerous other shops, but specifically the next row over. So I'm going to head to Warner Street, which has been described as one of the most haunted streets in the UK. Whilst I head there, let me give you a bit more information about the Slender Man. The Slender Man is a fictional supernatural character that began life as an internet meme in 2009. Thin, unnaturally tall humanoid with a featureless head and face, and in a black suit. He is a hostile character, and stories revolve around him stalking, abducting and traumatizing people, particularly children. The Slender Man became a pop culture icon, but soon a figure of controversy in 2014. Slender Man fiction became linked to violent acts, most famously 2 12-year-old girls from Wisconsin who held down and stabbed a 12-year-old classmate 19 times, as the Slender Man had instructed them to. The girls survived. They had said the Slender Man would kill their own families if they didn't commit the act. A documentary on the Slender Man followed in 2016. So despite existing as a character for 15 years, he is already a figure of folklore and an urban legend. But did the origins of the Slender Man come from the happenings here in Accrington? Okay, so now we are on Warner Street in Accrington. This is said to be one of the most haunted streets in the UK. Quite a number of the shops here have reported supernatural or paranormal activity over the decades. So not just one shop, quite a few. And things have happened in these shops. So we're going to try and look at certain ones that we know have reported things. But then we're going to focus specifically on number 3. Everything's looking a bit tired, isn't it? What's going to happen to these places? Okay, so although a number of shops on this street are gone, number 3 is actually still in use and actually open today as well. Like I think every other shop here, so it's that one there, the Missa Blow Fashion. So as it's open and in use, we won't get any closer today. I'll tell you the story in a different location. Of course, another version of the Slender Man could be linked to Doctor Who. A very similar character to the Silence. However, paranormal activity on Warner Street has indeed seen it dubbed one of the most haunted streets in Britain. One shop even had poltergeist activity in it. But alongside the Black Abbey pub and the now gone Pink Magpie and New Freedom, shadowy figures have been spotted. These shops have been investigated by a group of mediums. Carrying out a psychic experiment in the shop, they seemed to find out that the tall, slender man was known as Josiah, and he was a particularly cruel spirit, even going as far as attacking and pushing down the stairs one of the mediums. The physical manifestation of Josiah was described as a slender man or shadow man, a tall, thin, dark apparition in a tall hat. During a psychic investigation at number 3, another person manifested himself in their presence. A boy called Christopher, dressed in Victorian clothing, blood on his hands, saying over and over again, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." For the second half of the video, we're going to have a look at what happened in 1896 back on Warner Street at number 3, a particularly brutal murder, and somehow it seems to all link in with these Slender Man stories, and it will all make sense as the story unfolds. Is there some kind of connection between the two? Is what happened there in 1896 the reason for these kind of apparitions of a Slender Man across Accrington in the last 50 years? So number 3, Warner Street in 1896 is the home of cabinet makers John and Sarah Coates and their 25-year-old son Thomas. The business is very successful at this time, and they are even able to hire an apprentice, Christopher Hindle, a 15-year-old boy. They have a shop, obviously at number 3, and a workshop across the road. So on the 9th of June, John and Thomas are in the workshop, and Sarah and Christopher are in the shop at number 3. And all of a sudden, Christopher bursts into the workshop. He's clutching his shoulder and there's blood, and he's in hysterics, and he says to John and Thomas that Sarah has been stabbed. They both leave the workshop immediately and run to the shop, but the scene they find is horrifying, because Sarah is lying on the floor and her throat has been slashed. Christopher runs to get the doctor, Mr. Clayton, who comes to the house and pronounces that Sarah has passed away from her injuries. And then he puts the attention on to Christopher, who's got this stab wound seemingly in his left shoulder and scratches. The doctor just said they just seem to be more like flesh wounds. So he just kind of says he'll be okay, patches him up. Alarm bells immediately start ringing, and soon Christopher is brought in for questioning by the police. So when questioned, Christopher says that he was downstairs in the shop and Sarah was upstairs, and he heard screaming, and he ran upstairs and he saw a very tall man in a suit standing over Sarah, having slashed her throat. He then leaps at Christopher and stabs him in the shoulder before running down the stairs and out of the door. Christopher tried to give chase but couldn't keep up. So Inspector Sinclair arrives on the scene and takes over the inquiry and questions Christopher again. But this time Christopher's story is a little bit different, because he says the man ran down the stairs and out to the back street. His original story was that he'd run out to the front. Now, the inspector had already been onto the back street, and he'd noticed that there were paving slabs being laid on that back street by 2 men, and he questioned them and said had they seen a man in a tall man in a suit run past here or heard anything, and they said no. So this change of story set alarm bells ringing. A police surgeon was called, and it was identified that Christopher had been stabbed by some scissors, and Mrs. Coates' throat had been done by scissors, so the same implement. But the difference was that the surgeon believed Christopher had committed the wounds by himself, on himself, and he suddenly became the prime suspect, that there wasn't a tall man in a suit at all. Christopher went to trial, and it seemed quite likely that he would face execution if found guilty, and there didn't seem to be any other suspect, and there didn't seem to be a tall man in a blue suit. However, in a bizarre circumstance, a letter appeared at court. It was an anonymous letter, but it had come from Bolton. In it, it said that this man who'd written the letter had been at a pub, and whilst there, he'd been sat at a bar with a drunk man who was very tall and with a blue suit, and claimed that he'd committed a murder in Accrington and was struggling with what he'd done. The very next day, on the train line, the remains of a tall man in a blue suit were found. Obviously the guilt had been too much for him to bear. Despite this, it was not taken as a serious piece of evidence, and Christopher was found guilty of murder, but because of his age, he wasn't executed. Sarah is buried somewhere here in Accrington Cemetery, but where is a mystery. There are no records at all of where she's buried, or any of the Coatses for that matter. But you can see now where the connection comes in with this tall man, slender man. Is there some connection there? Is the man who committed this murder, if the story is true in terms of the murder, of who did it, if it wasn't Christopher, and a lot of people since have said it probably wasn't, was this tall, slender man, is he still about in Accrington? And I don't mean in a physical form. Is his guilty conscience still haunting these streets? Okay, there we go, folks. So that is the story of the 1896 murder from Warner Street, and all the hauntings of the Slender Man over the last 50 years here in Accrington. As always, when it's something like a ghost story, you are very welcome to believe whatever you like. If you believe it or if you think it's rubbish, totally fine either way with me. It is just a story I'm bringing you. But it's an interesting one, isn't it? And it's interesting that there were descriptions of this slender man nearly 40 years before there was even a character called the Slender Man. Yeah, I don't know quite what I think at the moment. But yeah, all these descriptions from the 70s and the 90s of this tall man with stretched limbs and opaque face in a suit, they all fit that description, don't they? But I'll leave it at that. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. Keep safe, please like, share, comment and subscribe, and we will see you very soon for the next video. Take care, bye for now.